This week on The Real Housewives of Orange County.
She's going after Katie about it when she's done the same thing. That's being a hypocrite.
You know what my intent was? To make sure
I know you
everyone
made
was
that
safe.
clear. You made that clear.
Everybody was safe. So then why did you call me and tell me who the hell would be with Vicki? She treats her boy.
Yo, what is up, everybody? Welcome back. Today we're going to be recapping the new episode of The Real Housewives of Orange County, which is Season 19 Reunion Part 1. Let's get right into it. Alright, y'all know I love a reunion, so I was looking forward to this. Part 1, though, I will say, from a 1 to 10, I would rate it maybe a 5. 5 out of 10, which is a failing score. It wasn't all that. I feel like maybe next week is going to be much more interesting, which we'll get to that. But there's still a few things to talk about, so I guess we can go on. Alright, so I will say I really love the set. It kind of reminded me of that Beverly Hills reunion that they had when the whole Erica scandal happened. It looked a little similar. I also love the colors that they had. They were like, it was kind of giving like Valentine's Day special. And I really like the color grading, by the way. So y'all know what the drill is. Andy goes around, introduces each of the women. They're shooting this in LA, so Heather says the drive was only like 7 minutes from where she lives. Emily says that she's lost a lot of weight. She lost about 20 pounds. She said that right after the season ended, she kind of got back on the grind of working out. Gina's doing her thing with the real estate, and it's great to see Katie because they haven't seen her in a while. Katie says that she needs to make up for lost time and say things that haven't been said. Tamra recently had reconstructive surgery in her breast. She also says to Andy, by the way, I won't be quitting today. Which is kind of embarrassing to say. Like, all the tantrums she threw this year were crazy. But she's very happy because the good news is that her friend Teddy is okay. Andy does also ask her about attending Alexis's wedding, which recently happened. And Tamra says that it was amazing. Jen was invited, then she got uninvited, then got invited again on the day of the wedding. I will say I saw some pictures of the wedding. It looked nice. I gotta be honest. It looked very nice. Even Shannon herself admitted that it looked like a nice wedding. So Andy asks Tamra, do you have any intentions for today? And Tamra says that this season has been tough, but she's trying to not be so reactive. She then tries to lie in our faces and say that, like, she was very calm this season as opposed to others. And I'm glad that they ran those tapes back to show how she acted this season. She acted just like she would act any other season. A mess. She's going off about therapy and keeps using Teddy's illness as an excuse for her behavior, which is such a shame for her to be doing that. So then Shannon interrupts and she says, I have to say this, and this may be inappropriate, but I didn't get the grace that you're asking everyone for. Jen says, yeah, it makes us look bad for us wanting to bring up stuff or issues that we have with you because you're going through the hardest time of your life. But Shannon was going through the hardest time of her life last year, and you didn't seem to care, which is very true. And Shannon says, yeah, and I'm just bringing it up because I'm just so frustrated. Tamra then says, yeah, I know. I've seen your frustration all season. And Shannon's like, oh, wow, okay, well, you know what? You are Tamra Grudge. You're the grudge holder, Tamra Grudge. That was a good one. Andy says that recently Alexis Bellino said that she thought that Shannon was trying to ice out Tamra to get her off the show, just like she did to her. Tamra agrees with this. She says 100%. But then Shannon says, I don't even plan what I wear. Do y'all really think I'm going to plan to ice people out? So then that's where Katie jumps in. And she says to Shannon, wait, so you didn't call production in the middle of the season and said that you felt unsafe with me and wanted my orange to be given to Gretchen? Did you say that? So then Shannon says, absolutely not. So then Katie looks at Jen and says, Jen, did she say that? And then here goes Jen again, acting dumb and like, am I supposed to know that somebody said that? And then Katie says, yeah, you told me about that. You were the one that said it. But of course, Jen denies it. Shannon denies it. I believe Katie. With Jen, I can't with her. Her little pattern of pretending to not remember is ridiculous. And with Shannon, I will say, do you guys remember? Oh, this was a long time ago. It was a season where Gina got a house or some little town. I can't remember. But Shannon called the place, what did she call it? She called it sad. And then Bronwyn at the time was telling people, and then Shannon, like, refused to, like, she kept saying that she did not say, but she actually did. So Shannon can definitely lie. So yeah, I definitely believe Katie on this. Then randomly, Andy brings up the sleepover that Heather had, where she said that she wouldn't trust Tamra or share information with her out of anyone in the group. Heather said, so the question to her is, why are you friends with her then? Like, if you can't fully trust her. So Heather says, we've been friends for a long time, historical friends, one might add, and I do love Tamra, but the reason I picked her name is because of Tamra's inconsistencies and her unpredictable nature. Andy asks Tamra, like, how do you take that? And Tamra says, I hear her, and I will work on that. We might need to have a deeper conversation, but yeah, I understand that. Emily says, well, can I just say, because during that game I said the same thing. I said that I didn't trust Tamra because, we saw how Shannon was her best friend and all the things that she threw about her. Tamra says, well, Shannon threw things about me too. So Shannon says, I only said one thing, and that was that you had a big ego. One thing, but you took that and went after me relentlessly. Andy then asks Tamra, why would you be surprised that they don't trust you when, like, you do expose secrets? Tamra says, when have I done that? Shannon says, you revealing that my dad had an alcohol problem? Tamra says, Shannon, in season 15, you yourself told Bronwyn about that issue. Shannon says, listen, for you to single out my father, I had to tell him in tears that his past was brought up on a TV show. And you said that I didn't care about my dad. How dare you? And then Tamra says, I was mad. And then Shannon says, that's what you do. You used the excuse that you were pissed off to be a horrible person. When it comes to my dad, you know what? And then she starts to choke up and she says, he held my hand the other day and said, you are the reason why I'm still living. So yeah, Shannon was definitely very emotional about this topic. Understandably so. Tamra says, well, I wasn't trying to single out your dad. It wasn't my place to mention it. I agree. Andy asks Tamra if her therapy has made her want to come in to today wanting to apologize. And she says that, yeah, she wants to do that and also stay calm. All right, so then we move on into the Katie drama. So we took a little bit of a look into the whole blogger drama, Emily's nanny, recording Shannon, and ultimately that BS lie detector test. Seeing that little, all those clips, it must have been very hard for Katie to watch a montage of every single one of these women just saying the worst things about her. Katie has been very surprised, she says, and very touched by all the love that the fans have sent her, especially after that lie detector test episode. The fans really rallied around her. Then, Emily, she just can't help herself and mind her business. So she says, well, let's go back to the recording with Shannon, because you keep saying that it was a voice note, but you obviously played it to Alexis. Andy says, yeah, Alexis did say that you played it for her, Katie. So Katie says, okay, if Alexis heard it, she says that I showed it to her, I would like her to say exactly what Shannon said on that recording. And then Shannon says to her, and by the way, you also said that I was so late that day. That's not true. Katie says, yes, it is. They couldn't even change your hair because of how late you were that day. So then that's when Tamra says to Shannon, don't you film people too? And then Andy's like, who did she film? And Tamra says that Shannon did that to Vicki. And I think they did that to Kelly Dodd too. So Shannon is a hypocrite. According to Tamra, Shannon filmed Vicki. Now, Shannon claims that it was for Vicki's safety at the time, but then she deleted it. But she was definitely caught. Emily says that she is very protective of her family, and when it comes to Katie, she was just in defense mode because Katie was doing an invasion of privacy. So then Katie says, okay, so are you saying that last year when you brought up all that stuff about me, that wasn't bad? And Emily says, okay, I apologize for bringing it up in the manner that I did, but it wasn't about your children. Katie's like, yes, it is. You brought up losing custody of children. It wasn't my 20s. That was the only decision that I could do. Like, why would you bring that up? I don't need to explain myself from 12 years ago to you. And then Emily says, listen, Katie, I feel like you use content creators and podcasters to fight your battles for you. You're allowed to be pissed, but at least bring it up and say it to my face. Katie says, and I truly do apologize for how I went about it. Andy then asks Jen, why did you call Katie a con artist? So it was actually Gina who revealed that. Gina was the one who was on a phone call with Jen. And on that phone call, according to Gina, Jen said, I don't even know if this girl is a con artist, referring to Katie. Now, shame on Jen for that. For, first of all, saying that, a con artist, that's a pretty big loaded word. And two, for acting dumb, like she doesn't remember saying it, but at the same time, showing her face, because even though she claims not to have said it or not remember saying it, she's also like justifying why she might have said it. So Jen is a mess. You know, her fall from grace really needs to be studied. Going from like a fan favorite last season to now. And why is she first chair, by the way? I can't. Andy then read a statement that Katie made about the lie detector test. And Katie is firm that she was set up by Emily. Emily says that she didn't set her up. She says, I don't even have that power. And it was actually Katie, the first one to bring up a lie detector test. So that's why we did it. But I didn't really even need a lie detector test to know that she was lying. Andy reads a question saying that Katie, there's a lot of people that think that she is much tougher and says tougher things about people behind their backs than in person. Why doesn't she say what she says in her confessionals in front of the people? And Katie, you know what? I was really surprised. She says, I should. She didn't try to deny it. She didn't try to back. No, she said, I should. Then Tamra says, a lot of people should. So then all of a sudden, Emily jumps in and she's like, what does that mean? You're not talking about me. Who are you talking about? And then Tamra says, you have said a lot of things about me in your confessionals. And then Shannon says, well, so do you. So then Tamra says to Shannon, be quiet. Sit on the end and be quiet. I'm not talking to you. But Tamra does say to Emily, you know, there has been things that you've said about me, like I'm not a girl's girl. And she goes off the list of things that Emily has said. And Emily just apologizes and Tamra says, thanks. Then Gina touches on that comment that Kiki Monique brought up that Gina had made to Katie about the Asian designers. So Gina does apologize and she says to Katie that she was never ever meaning to be malicious. And Katie says, thank you. And by the way, I never even called you the R word. I just said that when you said that comment, there were undertones. Gina says, yeah, and I get that, but I really do wish that you would have brought that up to me instead of going to Kiki Monique to talk about that with. And Katie says that at the time, she and Kiki were just bonding about being people of color in these spaces. Gina does reiterate that her intent was never to make Katie feel less than, and she says, if I did, I wholeheartedly apologize. Andy says, does anybody else want to apologize to Katie? There's then like an awkward moment of silence, but Shannon does say that she was not happy with saying that Katie was worse than Alexis Bellino. She doesn't necessarily apologize, but she, I guess, took it back in a way. Of course, Jen stayed silent. She didn't say anything else. Alright, so then we see Gretchen begin to get ready in her trailer, and you know, for I feel like the finale overshadowed a few things. I totally forgot about the whole roofied drama. They're gonna definitely get into that later. So then, back to the women, they take a look at some nice family scenes with the ladies and their children, so that was nice. But they also show Emily's storyline with her son this season. So they take a look at that. Andy asks Emily, how is Luke? Emily says that he went from being a very happy kid to all of a sudden regressing. Like he started acting like a baby, acting out. She says that when the first episode aired, a lot of moms reached out about something called PEMDAS. Never heard of this, but she was explaining something about strep throat causing brain swelling. That is so interesting. I really had never heard of that. She says that he is going to have a laser treatment on his brain to reduce that swelling. She really thinks and is really grateful for the moms who reached out to her because they watched the show. So that's, that's the positive side of the show, that I think, having help like that. So at least he's getting treated. She says that her and Shane's relationship it's good. She's obviously sometimes needs some support, like emotional support. She wishes she could get more from him, but she's come to realize that she can rely on her friends for that. So I'm glad she kind of sees that. But yeah, overall, I'm glad that they know what to do with her son. I do think Emily was very irresponsible in the way she presented this storyline this season, but at least, everything seems to be better. Jen's son graduated from the Marines. They do touch on that. And then Tamra talks about recently reconnecting with Sydney. So she's crying and talking about how she saw her and they talked and they hugged. And that was very nice. But to my people who've been watching the show since the very beginning, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't Sydney's biggest problem with Tamra her talking about her on the show? Why does she keep doing it? Alright, so then they bring Gretchen out. I personally thought that the dress looked very tacky. By the way, let's talk about the outfits for a second. Who was y'all's favorite? Let me know. Personally, I gotta give it to Katie. And then after Katie, surprisingly, I can't believe I'm saying this, I think Gina takes second place. And I think Tamra looked pretty good. Honestly, Tamra looked good. Jen looked good, I guess. Shannon looked okay. I was really unimpressed by Heather. That dress was not reunion at all. I don't know, it just wasn't that impressive. So Andy asks Gretchen, what has she been doing this time as far as work? She says that she's a digital marketer, she's an influencer, and she says use code Gretchen20 to get a discount. That starts to make sense because I remember going to her Instagram page one time and I saw people commenting things like fans, and she would say things like, check your DM. So now I'm understanding that maybe she was sending them codes to shop some product with her coupon code. She says that Slade is a consultant and he sits on the Liberace board. He happens to be friends with some guy who runs the foundation, so he got on the board. Anyway, they take a look at Gretchen and Tamara's feud this entire season. So they take a look at that. They ask Gretchen if she had reservations coming back, and she says yes, she did. They ask Tamara why did she bring Joe de la Rosa to that party. Clearly that was a dig towards Gretchen, and Tamara says no, it was not. She's a friend of mine. Gretchen says to her, I do think it was interesting. Out of everyone to bring, she brought Joe. Tamara says, I'm not here to serve you. Gretchen says, I didn't say you were. Andy then reads a question. Gretchen, why did you blame Tamara for Slade not having a job for 2 decades? Gretchen says, if it came across that way, I'm sorry. What I was trying to say is that the public domain can really cause harm. And then Tamara says, well, did him being arrested not affect him in getting a job? Did that not cause harm? Gretchen says no. Then they ask Gretchen, how does Slade contribute to the household? It sounds like he doesn't. It's kind of embarrassing. Then Heather goes back to some stuff that happened back in the day, like seasons and seasons and seasons ago. For example, they also talk about when she proposed to him. Gretchen says that she did it because at the time his son was very sick and she just wanted to show him that she loved him. Andy says that he secretly thought it was because she wanted to get married on the show and have Bravo pay for the wedding. But Gretchen says no. So they ask her, when will you be ready to get married? And she says, well, I am ready. But apparently she already had a religious ceremony. I don't know. The whole thing is weird. So then they talk about this rumor about Tamara sleeping with the artist. Heather says that Gretchen really wasn't, her saying this wasn't premeditated at all. It sort of just came out. Shannon tried to say something, but Tamara was like, I'm not talking to you. I'm not talking to you, so be quiet. You guys, the way Tamara was shutting Shannon down this reunion was crazy. It really was. She just kept saying, shut up, I'm not talking to you. Be quiet. She was just dismissing her. Anyway, there's a question for Emily. Why did she go running to Tamara to tell her about what Gretchen said about this singer rumor? Emily says, well, Tamara and Gretchen had just made up when we were all at the beach, so I didn't know why they were going backwards. And Gretchen says, you know what, I agree, that is true. I shouldn't have said that. Andy then says, Tamara, but why are you so upset at Gretchen for bringing up something from so long ago when you do the same thing? So then Tamara's like, when have I ever done that? So then they're all like, well, I mean, you brought up Jen's affair, and just today you brought up that Shannon recorded Vicki. So then Shannon and Tamara start to go back and forth again over this recording about Vicki. Tamara even exposes that Shannon said some things about Vicki, like who would ever want to be with her anyway. But then they also bring up how Tamara also said something about Gretchen having an affair. So that's the thing with these two, with Gretchen and Tamara. None of them are innocent. None of them are the victim. They're both equally as bad. So of course Tamara justifies it by saying, well, I brought it up because at that point I was so fed up. But then obviously then Gretchen gets to say, well, I brought what I said up because of everything you said about this. So it's just, it never ends. Tit for tat, tit for tat. And Tamra has a little she becomes unhinged towards the end. She's like, I don't talk about you, you talk about my husband. You know how she gets. She screams. That was the end of part 1. So again, part 1, if you want to skip it and not watch it, you will literally not miss anything. What I will say is that I think next week will definitely be a must watch because Matt is coming out. That's going to be interesting. And him and Katie are going to give them all a piece of their mind, especially Jen. And I'm really glad they are going to be doing that. But as far as this first part, nothing new was revealed. Nothing crazy. Yeah, it wasn't all that. But you guys, let me know what your thoughts were about this first part. Do you agree that it wasn't that good? Let me know in the comments. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. And I'll catch y'all next time. Y'all have a great one. Bye.